Welcome to the panel session on regenerative therapies in the dental, oral, and craniofacial space. We're going to talk about opportunities, challenges, and trends. I'm really excited that the Research Center has put together such a fantastic panel for us. All these folks here have a wealth of experience across all the different perspectives that are going to be extremely important as we continue to advance the technologies through the Resource Center. They come from strategic partner backgrounds. These are going to be the voice of your customer. The people who might be acquiring your new technologies, they come from investor perspectives, venture capital and other types of investments, regulatory strategies, clinical development strategies, and also how to operationalize new innovations. What's the reimbursement? What's the commercialization strategy? Who are the customers? So without further ado, I'd like to ask each of the panelists to provide maybe a 3 to 4 minute introduction on who they are, their current role, but also how they came into this role. And then also share with us one major trend from their perspective, just to get us going. And then we'll open it up for questions. So anybody want to go first? Not all at once. Gene?
Les and I were talking about that, which one of us was going to be first. So I've met many of you in the past, so I'll walk through the background as Connie suggests. My name's Gene Dorff. I've been in the dental industry now. This is actually my 20th year. So those of you who remember when I came in, it has been 20 years that I've been involved. But my career, my professional experience, I started my career with Procter & Gamble, then very quickly moved to Johnson & Johnson, cut my professional teeth on the Tylenol business when Tylenol was really big and strong. And then I moved into the medical side of Johnson & Johnson, spent a significant amount of time in working in medical devices, pharmaceuticals, mostly on commercialization and product entry strategies. About 20 years ago, I moved into dentistry. Johnson & Johnson acquired a company called Aura Pharma with a product called Arestin, and I helped bring that product was already in the market. I brought it to profitability, expanded the product portfolio, acquired the first generation of the Ossix membrane, brought that to market. That was my entry into regeneration, and I'm still here. So nobody's chased me away. I haven't left. Right now, I left Johnson & Johnson, a very important part of my career. I forgot I left Johnson & Johnson, went to work at what that time was Dentsply, and saw the other side of dentistry, the general dentist side. I ran the North American restorative products business for a number of years, and then I ran the restorative products globally. So anything that you would sell to a general dentist to fix or repair a broken tooth was in my domain. And I really had the opportunity to see how general dentists operate, how dental practices operate all around the world, which gave me a very different perspective. I branched and moved from that to the dental implant business of Dentsply Sirona. I led that business globally for about 5 years. Also acquired several regeneration companies during that time period. We had already had some regenerative products, but I expanded the portfolio. And I left Dentsply Sirona a few years ago and became part of Solmedics. And Solmedics is a little bit of a different play. We are involved in regeneration, but our core business is really around water purification, water safety within dental practices and clinical environments. Regeneration is an area that we moved into within the past 2 years. We bought an existing company that had a wonderful collagen-based technology, and we've been expanding the portfolio. We've licensed in a few other technologies, and so I haven't been able to get away from this. I've enjoyed it, and I think the questions that we were asked is trends that we're seeing. The one trend that I've seen over the past few years, and I think this comes from some of what I learned in working with general dentists, is simplification is important. The products that we create Yeah, it just seems as if, each generation, products need to be simpler and easier to use. The products themselves need to cover a broader range of indications. I'm finding that dentists are less likely to carry a broad inventory and formulary, for lack of a better phrase, of products. They're looking for their products to be more multi-purpose or more versatile in their use. And so as I think of products and what I'm working on, front of mind for me all the time is simplification for the clinician, simplification of the products themselves, ease of use, handling, versatility of the product, and then also how do we get it into use within the practice? It it needs to be, things need to be simpler and easier to explain. And I see that, continuing. There are many other trends that I'm sure others will talk about, with AI and 3D printing and whatever, but I tend to be very practical as I'm looking at things. And so that's me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Who wants to go next? Just go down the line? All right, great.
Go down the line. Great. Well, if you've been in dentistry forever, I'm the new guy.
Okay.
So,
Welcome.
thanks.
You can't get out.
So my name is Jason Woods. I'm the Vice President of Strategy and Innovation for Abova. So question is, who's Abova? So Abova is an investment and diversification company that is a sister company to Delta Dental of Minnesota. So those of you that are familiar with CareQuest, partnered with Delta Dental of Massachusetts. We're the teenage CareQuest. We're younger, less mature, a little crazy, and having fun out there. So I joined the organization about 18 months ago. I've worked periodically in dental over the course of my career, which I'll get into in a second. But this is the first time that I'm fully dedicated to the dental world. My background is actually in medical. My career has been spent in medical, and I've done a combination of strategy consulting work. I spent 12 years with PwC in their strategy practice, and did a number of payer and provider market strategy, new market entry, new market development, all the way through to operating strategy. But then I also spent about half my career in industry, both on the payer and the provider sides. And predominantly over the course of that time, I've run provider networks. So those of you that are here in Michigan, I ran the provider network for Priority Health for about 4 years. And those of you that know Priority, it's very highly concentrated in risk-based contracts, right? So we were very strong. I think they continue to be very strong partners with the hospital systems in the state. A majority of the membership is under a risk-based management contract. And so, that created a really good, I think, dynamic with the provider organizations where we would work with them to figure out treatment plans, treatment paths, what made sense, coverage. We did some unique and innovative things on how we covered things. If it made sense, then let's do it. If it doesn't, and the benefit's not there, then let's be clear about that and not do it. And so it was a really great opportunity to, I think, see, I'm going to say economics at work, right? So you can do the strategy work, consulting, right? And we can look at market reports and figure out, where the white space is in a market, and, all the great things that we like to pontificate on. But at the end of the day, you got to bring it to bear in the market, and you got to get folks to either change behaviors or adopt. And you got to figure out the economics behind that. So it's been an interesting play, right? And so Delta Dental of Minnesota was a former client of mine from consulting days. And they reached out. Bova has been in existence for about 7 years. It's gone through a couple of iterations where we started doing distribution, bringing in new technologies and acting as a distributor. Realized pretty quickly we don't have a broad sales force, so that's a little bit of a challenge if you don't have that. So then started going into investments and doing direct investments in companies. And I think, talking about trends, right, there's certainly some current economic trends, and we've seen tightening of the capital markets, and we're obviously now a part of that. And so that's forced us, I think, to reduce our risk tolerance. And so we're tightening up a little bit. And so now our board is directing us to do more acquisitions as opposed to investments. And so that's kind of where we're focused now. So this has been a great opportunity. I think I met a number of you at Forsyth last fall, which was probably my first major outing in the dental community. But really excited about what you're doing here. I really like the transparency. I like the hard questions that everybody's asking. I think that just makes everybody better. So I really tip of the hat to you guys on how you're approaching this. I like the milestones that you guys are using to keep things moving. So like a lot of what we're seeing here. So trends, if you asked for a trend, I'm going to give one that I've seen over the course of my career, and I think I continue to see it in what I'm doing today. And that is that a lot of times we don't consider, I'll call it the value proposition, or how the economics are going to impact the folks that we're expecting to adopt these things. So often we seem to come up with really innovative technologies, really cool things that when you compare them against either treatments that are already in the market or the expected benefits or the impact that you might have on a provider who is providing services downstream, and now you're taking those things away from them. We're not always wrapping our head around those things to figure those things out. And it impacts the ability of those technologies to move forward in the market and be adapted. But I'm sure we'll talk more about other trends. As Gene said, workforce is obviously a big issue in dentistry. The aging population, technology evolution is just right. The cycles are moving faster and faster, and so we just have to adjust to those. So that's me.
Hi, everyone. I'm Peggy Hansen. I'm the GM of Contract Development and Manufacturing and Senior Vice President of Quality, Regulatory, and Clinical Affairs at Regenerative Biosciences. I've been with Regenerative now 23 years, with overall medical device experience about 30 years. Much of that time was in quality and regulatory of new product development. At Regenerative, we bring innovation to life by developing and manufacturing medical devices to repair and regenerate soft tissue and bone. We use resorbable biomaterials such as collagen, bioceramics, and synthetic polymers. Specifically in dental, we develop and manufacture regenerative products such as collagen barrier membranes, bone grafting materials, and dental wound dressings. In terms of our business model, we have done sort of the traditional development work where we design and develop in-house, bring through regulatory, and then look for distribution partners. And mostly in that model, we private brand to our large, dental corporate partners. More recently, my role has been to expand our business model to contract development and manufacturing. And in that, we're looking for partners who partners that are interested in working on contract development, where they're looking for a next generation product or a new product in many different areas, including dental. And our role is to help bring those technologies or ideas to life. We also have partners who, similar to some of the ITP teams, where you have developed a process or a product through pilot R&D scale, and you're now looking for a partner to scale up, to bring it to commercialization, scale, GMP manufacturing. So we do that as well. We also have situations where a company might not be interested in manufacturing anymore, a particular product line. They may want to consolidate facilities. And so we call those lift and shift. So we'll take the process and bring it in-house if it's part of our core, capability, of course. With respect to trends, I would say we're seeing an expansion of the DSO market. So I think, just echoing Jean's comments about in that market to develop products that are easy to use, cost-effective solutions. I think that is a trend that we're seeing both in the US and in Europe internationally, the DSO market expansion. So I am very happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to the session and hearing what everyone on my co-panelists have to say as well. So thank you again.
Hi, my name is Dominik Lusek. I'm a chemist originally by training, and 20 years ago, I just realized when Jean said that he's been over even longer in dentistry. 20 years ago, I joined Geistlich as clinical trial manager. And that was really my start, both in the dental world and in the clinical trial world. At Geistlich, I came across a self-assembling peptide technology, which I then took myself out to form a company around that, Credentis. We developed the first peptide-based medical device. I have to say, put that in brackets because we're in the US. It's actually not a medical device in the US. It's a medical device in Europe. Here we had to find another regulatory pathway where Jeannie was also heavily involved in that. We sold the company in 2020 to Vivardis. They are now really expanding the use of Cure-Don't Repair, which is the flagship product in the portfolio in the US. And it also has shown me how long it takes to go from an innovation to a development to clinical adoption. So for me, that was about 14 years. Since I left Credentis, I kind of put on a few more hats, because when you're CEO of a startup, you really have to focus on the one thing, because that's what your investors expect you to do. And now I can actually look at a few other things. So you see behind me, I'm CEO of a company called PharmaTrail. We do clinical trial software, and I'll come back to that in a second. I'm also involved with Revere Partners, which is a small venture capital fund that focuses on dental and oral care. So I see really both sides, the investor as well as the startup side. Because I really like working with startups. I sit on the board of a few of them, again, mostly in the dental space, because that's where I have my network and where they're fun people to work with, to be honest. So when it comes to trends, I think what we've all realized on both sides of the aisle, meaning the startups and the corporate, is that the startups are really, really good in innovation development because they can focus on that. And a lot of the corporates realizing that, running business is priority 1, 2, 3. And development very often falls through. And it's actually easier to acquire or partner with a startup to get the right innovations in than doing it in-house. And when you think about that, from a startup perspective, I really think you cannot start early enough to talk with the corporates, not necessarily for an M&A or for a commercial, but to really learn what they need, what they want. I've started with a couple of startups to develop clinical trial protocols by actually going out there and asking possible corporate partners what are the endpoints they want to see, what type of questions they want to have answered within the clinical trials, because it might not be the classic, scientific parameter. It might be something like clinical adoption or time usage or etc. Parameters that you might not think of, but that are very, very important for the corporate to assess what implementation into a clinical workflow would actually look like. I said I would come back to PharmaTrail. PharmaTrail provides software where the audit trail and the data is recorded on a blockchain in order to give trusted data. Practically a platform where there is full transparency for all the stakeholders that can actually that have an interest in the data. Because one other thing that I had unfortunately experienced many times is the scrutiny that the corporate will go through, the due diligence in order to assessing the data, can take a lot of time and can lose momentum in those discussions. And then sometimes it's just the talks fall through, not because the product is bad, not because you fail, simply because the momentum is gone and there is another best thing. So if you have a trusted environment and if you get into that discussion early enough, I think there is a better chance to get through that, you know, to keep that momentum to hopefully come to a deal and an arrangement. All right, with that, I'll pass on.
Thanks, Dominic. Hi, my name is Les Burrows. I'm the general manager for Geislick North America. I think I took sort of the traditional path into regenerative medicine by starting my career with Ford Motor Company. So it's been a pleasure to be back in the Detroit metropolitan area. Again, it's been a long time. So I was with Ford in Detroit, San Francisco, and Denver, and then I took the next logical step and got in commercial real estate development in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is where I'm from originally. Joined a friend who had been in commercial real estate while we were even in school, and we were going to bid GSA contracts for different federal agencies. We'd win the bid, and then we would build the building for them and lease it back to them. And we did that relatively successfully. I think we built 10 buildings around the country. And I learned some very important and hard business lessons about a deal not being a deal unless it's a deal in writing. And I had gone 14 months without a paycheck and a newborn at home and figured it was about time to find another path. And so talked my way into a job with Stryker Leibinger as a sales rep in New Mexico and West Texas, and did that for a couple of years before joining the company where I really cut my teeth in the med device space, which was Integra Life Sciences. And for those of you that know them, they have a pretty solid regenerative portfolio. In particular, they did some interesting nerve grafts. They did dural grafting. We acquired a company called Isotis Orthobiologics that was big in spine and orthopedics. And during my 16 years with them, I think we acquired 52 different companies. And so it was a great learning ground for me on what it takes to incorporate new companies, new people. And that's, by the way, the number one thing I learned is that it's the people that matter in the company that you acquire. Of course, the technology is important, but you have to acquire great people. And so we were a bit the land of misfit toys. And it was my job, what my sort of expertise became is as these organizations would come in, it was my job to fix whatever little piece was broken. They typically had most of it right, but there was something in the commercial delivery that wasn't quite what you needed to be successful in the market. So my job was to sort of fix those as they came in. And it was a really fun job. And my last job with them was running Latin America for all the commercial businesses. And that was another good learning environment. You learn about all the different regulatory pathways in each of the different countries. It's not Latin America. It is Brazil, it is Colombia, it is Chile, all very, very different. And so that was a fascinating time as well. But when I came back to the States, there wasn't much to do that I hadn't done there. So I took a couple of different short-term med device jobs. And then I was really, really blessed. I got a call from Mark Spilker, who I had worked with at Integra years ago, who's the chief scientific officer for Geislick. And he said, "How do you like your job?" And I said, "I don't." And he said, "I can get you an interview, and that's all I promise you." And as it turns out, my wife's family happens to all be Swiss. So just dumb luck. I was able to talk my way into a job with this 173-year-old, still family-held Swiss company. Andreas Geislick, our chair of the board, is I think 6th or 7th generation Geislick running the firm. And one of the things was appealing on multiple fronts. One of them being that it was a privately held company. And particularly when it comes to looking at acquisition partnerships, because we're privately held, we can have a much longer term view of the value of the deal. If you're in a publicly held corporation, they want to see accretive to earnings within a quarter or two. And by God, you better get there, and the pressure is on. And I saw the closer I got to the decision-making chair, more and more how many bad decisions we were making long-term because we had a quarterly nut to hit. And so the idea of working for a family-held company that we could look at deals longer term was really exciting to me. And Geislich had built this incredible foundation of xenograft that was all built and developed in Wolhusen, Switzerland. And I think Dominic said last night as I met him, he goes, back when I worked with him, if it wasn't made in Wolhusen, it wasn't any good. And that was absolutely the belief in the company. But they have come to realize, and part of me coming aboard was to look for partnerships and opportunities that make good sense. And so I think as you all are building your organizations, I think one of the really fun things is one of the recent acquisitions we were able to do since I came aboard was Lynch Biologics, which is a PDGF material. And this is something I would say in terms of trends is as your potential partners are looking at you, your technology can be accretive to their already existing business rather than cannibalizing that business. And so PDGF is formulated right now to be delivered with beta TCP. The reality is most docs don't use it with beta TCP. They throw that away and they apply it to whatever bone graft or soft tissue graft material that they want to use. Well, our products are a perfect delivery device for that. We have to talk carefully because of off-label use and those sorts of things, but docs absolutely have that ability to make those decisions. And so it's been a really, really fun place to be as we look at that. And now we've partnered with somebody like MTF. So now we can play well in the allograft space, which is another, in the US, much larger segment than we were able to play with before in the xenograft space. So this sort of goes along with a trend that I'm seeing is companies are reinventing themselves. So some of these traditional players are having to change the way that they come to market to remain viable and to remain relevant and continue to show growth in their business. So you look at Nobel, right? They started Nobel Biocare because things were challenging on the implant front. They've tried to find a new path that could be different. Geislich has clearly changed the way that we came to market. We were dominant in xenograft, but we were not playing anywhere else. So now we are doing that. And I think there are multiple companies that are reevaluating. You know, we typically, we've acquired some now, but we hadn't really thought of co-development. Now I think we're starting to consider that too. So we can look at earlier stage companies and we can place that bet with them earlier in the process, which I think is fun as well. So I think Gene said simpler and something that he sees as a trend. The other one that I hear all the time is new bone faster. What I would say, I think aligns more with Gene's, which is, does it bring economic value to the clinician? In the med device space, you see it a lot, where you've done studies that demonstrate real economic value. In the oral and dental space, I haven't seen much of it, and I think it's a real opportunity. If your product or your technology can demonstrate some sort of economic value, and you may think, well, moving from 92% success to 97% success isn't really material. Well, if you're the GP that does 5 a year, maybe not. But if you're the specialist that does a couple of hundred a year, and now you've saved, I don't know, 12 to 15 failures, that's material. Not just in terms of cost, but in terms of reduced opportunity and your reputational cost. And so I think economic value is really important, and reduced time in the chair, I think, is the other place where you can demonstrate that. So I guess that's sort of my thoughts, and I'll look forward to other questions.
Great. Thank you to all our panelists for that introduction. We do have a lot of time for questions. Maybe I'll just start with one because all of you to a person, I think, mentioned your role on the acquisition side or the co-development side. I wonder if you could just, those of you can take whatever portion you want to answer. How should our teams be thinking about when it's best to engage a strategic? If it's just, Dominic, like you're saying, the earlier the better, just to get some feedback, or B, to a co-development stage, what kind of data package might it look like then, all the way to like M&A? What kind of data package and de-risking are you all looking at those different stages?
Yeah, I'll give you my 2 cents. I think Dominic's, if I can summarize, if that's all right, I think he was just saying to ask questions early. I'm sure you've all worked for somebody where you had to have your cake fully baked before you bring them any sort of idea, right? And This is exactly how it's going to turn out. And you may have spent weeks preparing only to find out that there was some piece of the puzzle that you weren't aware of that completely invalidates everything you've done. If you'll ask those questions early, your commercial partner will likely become more interested and can provide good guidance. Even if it doesn't fit for them, they can direct you to someone else. So that's my thought.
Yeah, perhaps I'm the one who sits mostly on the other side, and I can only second that. If building up trust between the partners and being able to know the questions to start off with, and having the relationship that if you miss something, and at one point reality always hits, there is no such thing as a perfect product. You need that trust between the partners, and that, in my experience, that needs time to build up. You cannot, go into a discussion saying, "Look, we're here for an M&A," and then hope to rush through this in a few weeks. That just doesn't work, at least not in my experience.
I'll add a couple comments. In terms of strategic partners and when to approach, I think there's sort of maybe two kinds of strategic partners. You have like the Geislick, where they have end user sales force, and you have another type of strategic partner like Regenerative Biosciences, where we're looking at platform technology. So in terms of how you're positioning your program, whether it's a technology platform that has beyond dental, there's other applications. In fact, that's how we were built. We started in dental. We took that same technology, moved it to neuroscience, neurosurgery, moved it then to orthopedic spine and beyond. So that's one thought is, who are you approaching and why? And I do think earlier the better. I would agree. I think you don't have just one shot on goal. You're planting seeds along the way. This is where I am. Be transparent, which the teams have been. This is where we are today. This is where we plan to go. Let's engage again. Maybe in a year, come back. The commercial partners have budgets that they're planning ahead, a year, 5-year strategic plan. Maybe you're part of the 5-year strategic plan, but you won't know until you get your information out there. The other quick thing would be, who do you find in the commercial partner? It is hard to navigate sometimes in these giant partners. Is it the business development person? Is it the R&D person? Is it the commercial? Is it the product manager? Is it senior leadership? And so I would say all until you find the person who says, I'm interested and I'm going to be your advocate, and start to spread the word inside the partner. So just some thoughts.
You want to go? Okay.
Since we're going down the line. I always hated the term fail fast. Fail fast to me seems like you're pushing to some finality. I really think that, in any type of endeavor, any type of particularly new product that you're looking to launch, it's a learning process. And it's going to be an iterative learning process. And I've always pushed folks to respect the power of the iteration. And so networks like this, right? Like this organization and what we're doing today. Look at the diversity of thought that's just sitting here on the panel, let alone what's in the audience. These are all folks that can be sounding boards. They can, challenge you, push you. And likewise, you can push them, use them to question how you're thinking about things. And it will help you not only figure out the application, but maybe more importantly, the messaging and who you're talking to and what the next step is. So kind of building on what we were saying is, there are those contacts that are going to help you with that initial thought, and then those contacts that are going to help you bring the product to market. And so it's okay to think about those things in different stratas or levels, but don't be afraid to use them. And so the sooner the better.
Yeah, thank you. I would say, I think Peggy makes a great point. The dance is important. Who is going to really be the partner for your product? You can probably look at the corporate landscape today, and figure out a short list of people or companies that can logically, bring the product forward, or you would at least see it fitting within their portfolio. And then it's, finding the internal advocacy, within that company or group of companies to help you get across the finish line. But open that dialogue early so that they understand, everyone understands what everyone is working on, and hopefully, one of those will come together. People are focused on milestones. The further you can get into the development, the more valuable the company becomes. Patent protection, then you get through, your clinicals, and maybe you get 510(k), or you get your drug approval. Those are points of inflection, they're points of growth, but they're also, potential exit moments. And that's what companies, at least from having worked in what I'll call large dental at a company like Dentsply Sirona, even they were more focused on approved products that are ready to go, as opposed to funding things that were very promising. They do fund things that are newer and developing, but they really liked things that, had an approval and they could bring to market, and they could ride that wave. They have plenty of money. There's nothing, that they probably couldn't afford to buy, if they wanted to. So they don't necessarily, when people look at things and say, buy now, you can get in early. That's not a compelling argument, for a large corporation. Large corporations have access to, enough capital to, if they see something that they want to buy, if it's, whether it's just approval stage or it's been on the market for a year or 2 years, and they see growth, they have the mechanisms to do things. So it's about, I think, doing that dance, finding the right potential partners, having that dialogue, but also having something that's very tangible for them, that they can see how this is going to contribute to their business, over the long term. Those are, important pieces. So.
Thank you. I'll pause for a second. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to ask a question of this group? Everybody's really quiet all of a sudden. We were talking about how this group is not shy. Well, I was curious, because many of you have touched, oh, looks like Will has one. Go ahead, I'll let you go.
There you
It was really great hearing all, your wide and varied experiences, and hearing what some of these trends are, bringing them up. And, for this group, really focused on innovation and, bringing together technology needs and clinical needs. And as each one of you said, a lot of the products you're looking at maybe to acquire that are fulfilling many of those characteristics. And I think, Les, you had mentioned that, many of these new products coming out, really trying to see the economics of them. And, we're looking at the beta version, just these early stage technologies are very challenging. And then within dental practice, both Gene and Peggy were talking about DSOs really emerging. And as you see dental education and the next generation of dentists, even DSO organizations helping support the birth of new dental schools. So we see that cost and return on investment from the practitioner is a big challenge. And so for an innovation group like ours, in trying to understand that, because as Les mentioned, there are really very few studies on the economics of these new products, and really does it have that benefit to the patient beyond the existing therapies that are out there right now. And so for us, we do want those new exciting technologies, but to move the needle in terms of clinical practice. So what do you see as that balance in trying to show, the economic return on investment, because dentistry really hasn't been as strong in that area, and then just the current climate in dental practice?
Thanks, Will. So maybe I'll take a stab at it first, since at the microphone. I spoke about simplicity, and I was looking at a lot of the presentations today. I think there's a lot of great promising technologies and products that can come to market. But the thought that was running through my mind as I was going through this was, okay, these technologies some of these are breakthrough. We're going to show potentially ways to save teeth, preserve teeth. We're going to show ways to grow, new soft tissue or protect soft tissue. They're all very exciting. Now, how do I get this into a dental practice and get a dental practice to adopt this, right? So, it's going to require some change. Workflows are important. Economics becomes a part of it. If it's too expensive, as we've seen with some products, we price ourselves out of the market before we can even get in the market. Dentists, a lot, they are owner operators. They are price sensitive. They do look at things and say, okay, it may be a better technology. It may yield improved care, but I can't afford, to charge my patient this, or I can't afford to absorb this cost. So we have to think about the cost relative to what a dentist is charging a patient today. If we can improve that, that's even better. If we could say, look, this may be a little bit more money, but you're going to be able to work faster, you're going to be able to treat more patients, or something like that, then they will certainly be very open-minded to it. But we do need to think about the cost. And then there's the cost of bringing it into the practice. What has to happen? Everyone from the office manager to how the product is billed for, to how the product is ordered, to the assistants and the hygienists are going to use the product. How do we incorporate this into their everyday? I think all of that fits into the acceptance and the economic considerations, because as a product is used every day and incorporated into their workflows, into their treatment protocols, the cost comes down. It's absorbed, within the practice and what they're doing, day in and day out. It gets absorbed into their billing structure. And that sounds kind of simplistic, but that's sort of the way it seems to work. It is not like medical care. Perhaps you can speak more to this, but in medical, hospitals are reimbursed, physicians are reimbursed a lot at the code level, and there's certain values assigned to code levels, and it becomes finance really quickly. I think dentistry has a little bit more latitude. It's about getting the traction on that product, making it fit within the practice, and be able to explain to people how to use it. And hopefully we're not complicating their life in doing this. We're making their life easier and simpler. The minute we tell a dentist or a dental practice, you can do this, it provides better outcome, but it requires an extra appointment. It requires 15 minutes more chair time. You need to learn a new procedure. You need to use new instruments. Their interest starts to fall off dramatically. So, anyone else?
At the end.
Yeah, perhaps from the side of the startup, I think, anything to do with the economics, with the workflow, you should include into your development plan. I mean, usability is something that the regulatory asks you anyway to do that, and you cannot spend too much time on that. When you then move on to perhaps do your first pilots, really go to exactly the point. It's like, how is it used within clinical practice? What is the workflow, but also what is the cash flow within that practice, meaning where are the revenues generated? Because that, from a development or from a technical development point of view, might not be what you think of first thing, but it will be of high interest to the corporate partner, the strategic partner who wants to acquire that, as Jean outlined.
Just one more add-on, if I could. So I would just say in your study design, if you can, a little bit to piggyback Dominic's, is think about measuring those things that can deliver economic value, whether it's measuring chair time. And I would also say, think about, I know you're focused on your core technology, whatever that is, but also think about your delivery device of that technology. Does it make it easier for the clinician in their practice to use it? And think about things like packaging. Does the packaging that you're going to put it in save time, save space, save costs? All of those things, I know it's going to be the core product that you're focused on initially, but think about those, quote, incidentals that end up combined making a big difference in not just the study outcome, but in the product adoption. And then the last thing I would say is be okay with hitting some singles and doubles as opposed to the home run. So your product doesn't have to solve everybody's problem. Your relatively small niche can turn out to be very profitable and do great things for you and great things for some subset of the patient population. So be okay with that. I'll just use Integra as an example. They were the little company competing against J&J and Medtronic in the neuro space. And J&J and Medtronic didn't care that much about neuro because it wasn't that big relatively. They were much more interested in cardiac rhythm management or in spine. And Integra built themselves a nice little business that's now worth $2 billion plus annually in sales because they started with that little niche that was okay. So your little niche product can turn into something really spectacular.
Thanks. Oh, another, go ahead. And then you can line up for your question.
Maybe I'll just add a couple of comments related to the regulatory pathway and the investment that takes. Certainly, I mean, everyone here knows the 510K versus a PMA pathway and the big difference in investment time to market. I did see many of the presentations this morning talk about a phased in regulatory approach. So I encourage that. I think that's you know, to Les's point, you don't have to solve the whole world in one approval. Phase in your clearances, and some of the main factors of determining the regulatory pathway would be the material selected, your indications for use, the mechanism of action, the claims you're trying to make on the product. So maybe, you know, start with a reduced claim and then build once you're on the market in the clinical, then build, you know, your further value prop after that.
Some of those regenerative things we're talking about there, talking up craniofacial. So I just want to get out of just pure dental and get into craniofacial just a bit. Let's say you're developing, you talked about PDGF, right? So biologics are really on the drug side now. I mean, they're already scared of the stuff. I understand that BMP wasn't, and they've learned from that and so on. If you're going down the road with a product and it looks like it might be drug device, but on the drug side, are you really talking, I mean, can you give some just purely these big strategics? I mean, one of the big things that we're talking about there is the payoff on the DRG, not being on a DRG, is much higher, but it means longer and it means sort of going through development of where that is. Is that something we should be looking at, these smaller companies that might leverage you to get through to and through the FDA and do what they need to do and then out of there? Or is it pretty much because it's going to take longer and it's going to take a deeper pocket? Or, you know, are they just not going to be able to service that? I mean, what's the best way of negotiating that? Because more things I think are going to start going sort of drug device, but and regulatory going to be on that other side. You know, so I've heard that the upside of that is no DRG, we could hit a home run, right? But the downside is, you know, you're spending more time and it's a lot more regulatory. So you give us a little bit of opinion on that?
Perhaps I can put the investor hat on for a side. You know, obviously in drug, there is the so-called blockbuster business model where you can generate value already during development. And, you know, the drugs, you know, they go into phase 3, they do an IPO in order to raise the money to do that phase 3. I haven't really seen that in dentistry to work. And that's why from an investor point of view, I'm a little bit cautious when it comes to anything to do with a clear drug pathway. Obviously, if you're starting to look at drugs used in dental applications that are already approved, that's a different story. I think there you can be something else, but I think you'll have mainly issues attracting those big investors to the dental space because unfortunately there have been some failures in that space. Oh, on the medical side, absolutely. Then you're back at the blockbuster business model where, you know, there are a number of venture capital private equity firms that will invest in your development. And it's, you know, if you make it through your phase 3 trial, they're going to have their 10x return. And if not, they know that it's going to be a complete write-off. But yeah.
Any other comments from the panel? Oh, on the end here.
As one of the few people who probably has brought a drug to market in the dental space. I didn't always have white hair. It is not easy to do. I mean, you can get it through the regulatory bodies. That's one thing, but the dental model does not accommodate drugs right now, prescription drugs or drugs that are even used within office. And that's something that I think we need to figure out, because I do think that there will be some more, products that are going to require drug approval. But, and I think we talked about this in the beginning, how does a dentist office bill for a pharmaceutical product? Are the mechanisms and the infrastructure there for that within their billing systems and their coding systems, and so on. And when we launched Arrestin, there was no mechanism, to get that product paid for. It was patient pay only. The pharmaceutical benefit that patients had, did not cover it. The PBMs and the drug plans were not covering it, because their answer was that's a dental product. And then when you would submit to dental insurance for that, they say, no, 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 that's a drug product. And so that may not be exactly what you're asking about, but I think it's important for us to just think about how are we, and once things are approved and if they are classified as drug, it then takes us into the conversation of who the payer is going to be and how do we work through that dynamic in dentistry. So I don't have the answer, but it's something we need to think address somehow.
Question up there? You want to? Thank you for that. Oh, question here, Charles, and then down here.
Out of goodwill purely? No. I'd love to say I have that much goodwill, but no, I would want something in exchange. But yes, there are absolutely models, co-development models where you get an equity position in the company as part of either early funding or support or introductions or all those sorts of things that you can do. And the percentages move up and down the scale depending on what's required on the front end and all those sorts of things. I think the bigger companies in particular obviously have deeper pockets and can take more of those risky investments. It's sort of what I started with, right? We were trying to convince Geislich to make any investment, so it had to be commercial stage where there was revenue associated with it that we could accelerate. But I think we're now at a point just a couple of years later where we would consider co-development deals. And I know many of the bigger companies are absolutely interested in that model and would be willing to place an early bet without initial revenue associated with it and see where it goes, particularly if they love the people that they're interacting with, for sure.
We had a question here and then one over here. We have 4 minutes left. Yeah, right here. You can grab that microphone.
I have a question on
Wait,
clinical
wait.
studies, and Dominic, you might have a thought or two
You're
on this. So we're in an industry where most GP dentists read trade journals, don't necessarily read peer-reviewed articles. And obviously, all of us want to do really robust clinical studies. NIDCR, I don't think funds them. Do you have any recommendations on how a small startup company can really do robust clinical studies by leveraging academic partners, by leveraging government grants, et cetera?
Government grants is difficult because there are very few out there for clinical trials. So that is normally what you put into your business plan when you go out talk to investors. Your clinical trials will be probably your biggest budget position in that stage of the development, meaning pre-market. Yeah, as a startup, you sometimes get some goodwill from the academia, meaning that they are willing to do the studies for a little bit less money, but that's a two-sided sword. I think in the end, you'll need to raise the money from the investors. Maria? Absolutely. And, you know, when I talk investor, I don't only mean a VC, PE or similar, but that can be a strategic, perhaps as a follow-on to Charles, which also goes over there. Yes, it's, you know, it's definitely an option to work with a strategic, have them as investors, just already kind of prepare what happens if you don't hit the endpoints, because it's difficult to have a strategic on your cap table and then you're trying to sell it to another company. So, you know, the contracts need to be looked at well. And by the way, it's also for the strategic not of interest to block any further deals if they don't have the interest anymore. So it's also in their interest to walk this through. But there is, I mean, I'm thinking of one particular company who has equity stakes in plenty of small startups, and they've simply lost interest in some of them, and they're really struggling to get other investors in. So always kind of look at the whole life cycle, plan, hope for the best, plan for the worst.
Let's try to get one last question in for the
Yeah.
session.
I think, you know, it's been a really fruitful discussion about the potential role of drugs. And I think that the growth factors story is really just the tip of the iceberg of potential druggable targets. And we know, the strong connection between oral and systemic health. What I'm wondering and hearing a lot of is that there's a little bit of a risk aversion to drugs, certainly a risk aversion in the investment environment right now. I'm wondering how you all think about in your roles, as large corporations and as investors about leveraging the oral systemic connection and really integrating dental and medical care towards advancing oral health, but really in the greater picture of systemic health rather than dentistry and dental products and really what's mostly been devices as its own isolated industry.
I certainly can take this from a medical perspective. I think there is growing opportunity to do that, but I think it's still, I'm going to say on the nascent side. There are areas where it's happening across the country. So, it'd be very easy to look at like, Kaiser and running a dental plan. But, I think probably one of the best examples would be Oregon and the way that they've approached Medicaid, and, coming up with a single funding pool that covers medical, dental, and pharmacy, behavioral health as well. But, those I think are our three key points. And I think, what that ends up doing to, what Gene was talking about earlier is it changes the economics, right? And so I'm seeing at least some of the providers out in that space talking now more about prevention, and the things that they can do to stave off caries and the longer term problems that happen in the mouth because of the systemic problem, but the savings then get captured on the medical, right? Because that's where the big dollars are. So, so I think those, that provides an opportunity. Until we start doing that, until we start moving more in that direction more generally, I don't know that there's going to be a huge opportunity to do that. And I think that's part of the challenge that we're all facing. Is there are things that make sense and would be good to do, but it's, the questions earlier, there's value generation and then there's value capture. And if we can't capture the value, then who cares what we're generating?
All right, we're going to have to stop there because we're going on to the pitch presentations. Let's give our panelists another round of applause.